Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Erickson from Stepping Aside, and welcome to Somewhat Daily Tarot and Rune for the 19th day of September, 2018. So in this year of illumination, we have a 1 day or new beginnings. If you haven't been here before, I generally draw one card and one rune, one tarot card and one rune. But sometimes I draw two tarot cards and two runes, so we need a little more information. But generally, we just want to get a general idea about what the day is going to be and the kinds of things we ought to be focusing on or paying attention to. Sometimes it has a personal feel to it. Sometimes it has more of a societal feel to it. A lot of things going on in our world right now. Might not feel as good to some people as it does to others. So, it's nice to check in with the cards and the runes to see what's going on, if we can get a little insight. But what I do is I shuffle a little bit, talk a little bit, and then I draw a card. I count 13 and draw that card. 13 figures prominently in my life. I was born on the 13th. Lots of things happened in 13s with me. I don't know why. Let's count 13 and see what we have for today. Well, we have a court card, so we'll be drawing another one. Court cards are interesting. They can either mean the qualities of the individual or the type of individual itself. So in this case, we have the King of Cups. Cups is our emotional presence. It's the water element. It denotes change, intuition, emotion. And here we have a king. A king is typically an authority figure, a male person in your life, or perhaps a male energy, a proactive energy or projective energy. Doesn't have to necessarily be a man, to have some Mars energy to you or leadership skills or what have you. So you can see it can either be the individual or the leadership skills maybe, or other qualities, authority, having to do with the king. The thing about I think I left my magnifying glass over by my chair, so we'll use a candle here. The thing about the King of Cups, he's looking toward the future. He's holding his scepter in one hand and his chalice in another. You can see that his throne is floating around on the water. And, the king can be compassionate, but he can also, if he's ill-dignified, be a little passive-aggressive. But you can see down here, he's basically floating on the water. So floating on his emotions, his emotional presence. Well, let's draw another card and see. Sometimes the King of Cups can be a positive influence, but a lot of the time the more watery elements, you'll get someone who's benevolent probably, but at the same time, I'm always a little fearful of the King of Cups. I always think, well, a little passive aggression, and that's a tough one. If you have someone like that in your life, it's a tough one to deal with. If you're passive aggressive, it's a difficult thing. You have a hard time coming to center on things. You sort of go back and forth. It can be someone like that can be manipulative. So it can actually work against you to be that way. So, but let's see if that's what we're talking about, or if we're talking about just a male figure that's an authority figure in our lives. Well, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which is the 10th card of the Major Arcana, which aligns today. Did I do that right? Yeah. That aligns today with a 1 day. So new beginnings, completion, new beginnings. The wheel is turned. This is a positive card. We talk about cycles when we talk about the wheel, though, don't we? Um, there was something here in my book that I wanted to look at. It deals with the law of prosperity, synchronicity, completion, movement, ebb and flow, unexpected profit, unexpected luck, maybe, success. Um, but basically, we're talking about cycles. So if you're talking about the King of Cups, and if you're talking about something that is, say, emotional, and if you're talking about movement, then what this might be dealing with is dealing with the ebb and flow of our emotions and how they affect our ability to maybe relate in the world to others, especially if we're in an authority, if we're an authority figure in someone else's life. Sometimes, if you've ever seen a biorhythm chart, that the lines do this, they're sine waves, okay? And so sometimes, if you're in a good mood, you're going to be your wave is going to be up here, and if you're feeling depressed or you're not feeling real great emotionally, then it's going to be down here. So in other words, you have peaks and you have valleys, okay? And when the King of Cups comes up, it tells me I just tend to see this guy as a little passive aggressive. I don't really view the King of Cups as a very positive card. I don't think that men always know what to do with their emotions, and I think that sometimes they come off as maybe a little too pushy when maybe they should just sort of hang back. So maybe they're not comfortable with having that moment of centering, where they're maybe not reacting, where they're just, kind of taking it in and reacting in a way that's not so much about what do you expect me to do about this, and more just listening and feeling compassion and all of that. If you have a struggle with that, whether you're a guy or a girl, doesn't make any difference. We all have struggles with that to some degree, extending that kind of compassion to others. Sometimes we're in our own, weird, funky mood or whatever, and maybe we can't really extend that love or compassion to someone else. But typically, men have a hard time with it sometimes because they view themselves in this particular way, and they're not allowed to show emotion, and oh my goodness, that makes us weak and all this stuff. Well, it's not true. Strength is actually found in compassion. And so, if you have a king in your life, or if you have, an authority figure in your life, or you are an authority figure, think about how you express that authority to others, and recognize the cycles and the ebb and flow of things. Maybe not react to things when maybe they're, up here or down here. Maybe choose your reactions, in the downflow and the upflow of those energies. Staying out of the extremes, in other words, trying to stay more in the middle ground of things, allowing the cycles to flow through your life a little bit rather than trying to interrupt them all the time. Um, when I see cups, I think flow, and usually a king will, I mean, he can either make or break that flow. He can either add to it and contribute to that and make it a positive experience, or they tend to, maybe be just a little too, kind of stab you in the back kind of people. So understand that doesn't actually lend itself to success. So, although sometimes it does, and unfortunately, when it does, it tends to reinforce that behavior within that individual. So, but let's see what the rune has to say. This is an interesting one. You can either get in the way of your success, or you can help it along. And um, sometimes being a strong authority figure, too much fire, too much Mars energy can uh, make you this sort of authority figure that is not so benevolent, doesn't necessarily understand the needs of others. King of Cups oftentimes will understand the needs of others, but maybe doesn't necessarily, can be too much wrapped up in his own emotional process to really respond to it. So um, let's see what the rune says and see if we can get a little more direction. But with the new beginnings today, this being a 10 card and this being a number one day, then, we're maybe the idea behind the tarot here is to bring some light to this, and with this whole notion of letting things flow a little more than trying to interrupt the process. Here you have Kenaz, which is the seventh, I'm sorry, the sixth rune of the Elder Futhark, not the seventh. The seventh is Gebo. But Kenaz goes this way. Open this way is to light. This other way, if it were that way, if I did directionality, which I don't, I'm going to get this right eventually. But open the other way, it can mean darkness. But this is illumination. When we talk about Kenaz, we're talking about the torch. We're talking about illumination. And again, we're in this year of illumination. Vitality, fire. But basically, if you're talking about Kenaz and you're talking about the King of Cups, then maybe you're talking about somebody who's keeping secrets, and some things need to be revealed. And as the rune of openings, that's what Kenaz does. It can purify, it can bring healing and well-being. But mostly, I think this has to do with secrets. Things aren't the way they seem, which a lot of the times with the King of Cups, they aren't. Particularly if he's a little passive aggressive and if he's somebody that maybe might be a little manipulative or is more wrapped up in his own emotions than he is in thinking about other people. A king should be benevolent and should express that benevolence for all. Knows how to be strong and say, no, this is what needs to happen. I know a little more than you guys do. I have more facts, more information. We're going to do it this way. I'm the boss and all that. But you can do it in a way that respects other people, that appreciates the ebb and flow, that maybe doesn't react to every little thing that comes up, that maybe gives it a chance to settle out and allow things to flow a little bit before reacting, but then at the same time knowing when it is the right time to react and to deal with something. But Kenaz coming into play along with the King of Cups tells me that we have an individual maybe, or maybe we're expressing this in our own way, that maybe isn't quite as revealing as they need to be, maybe keeping things back, things going on in their mind, that maybe are portending something else that might be happening that we don't know about. And the torch is, or Kenaz as the torch is leading the way and opening our eyes to what's going on. The king can play a lot of games when he wants to stay in power, when he wants to stay in control. But I think that the natural cycle of things may have something to say about that. The Wheel of Fortune is a card from the Major Arcana, so it's a soul archetype card. So it's this higher self tapping us on the shoulder and reminding us that, we might get caught up in our emotions, particularly if we have a position of power over someone else, and we might let our emotions guide our way. And that's fine to a point, because sometimes reason, doesn't allow for compassion to get in. But if we're having trouble balancing that and we don't respect the ebb and flow of things, we might get caught up in reactions when really, if we just let things sit for a minute or two, the truth might reveal itself to us. If we are that sort of a person, we might consider what effect we have on others. How that might impact others in their day, especially if we have a position of authority over someone else. If we are constantly in an emotionally charged situation, it can be difficult. It can be exhausting. And so allow the cycles to move and flow and understand the ebb and flow of things. Sometimes situations are just emotional because it's for that moment. People are in their cycle in a weird place. Maybe you've got some that are up at the peak and some are at the valley, so no one's in sync. So allow things to settle out before you really, if you have to have a conversation, if something, if you're upset about something, you're bothered about something, you need to discuss something with somebody. Peaks and valleys they don't necessarily work in those situations. And so maybe you just need to allow things to settle more to the middle, and then approach whoever you need to at that point. and give that recognition to someone else if they need to talk to you and you're not feeling your best. If you're feeling in the peak or the valley, recognize when you're there and say to them, look, I'm really not at my best right at this moment. Can you allow me just a little bit of time to come to a little more, have a little more peace inside myself, and then we can sit down and talk. My mind is everywhere. My emotions, I'm just, I don't know, I'm making myself a little crazy right now. So let me calm down and then I'll have a better conversation with you. So maybe that's what the message is for today. So if you have somebody like that in your life that you're having a difficult time talking with because they're here and there and everywhere, try to get them on the middle part when they're not so high, not so low, and you'll have a better experience. And same if it's happening for you. Um, Societally, lots of triggers right now. Um, Pay attention again to the cycles. If you're in an extreme, back off from it. Turn off the TV, get offline, take a walk outside, you know, get yourself away from whatever chaos you're in, even if it's the chaos of your own mind. Um, for those people that are survivors of sexual abuse or sexual traumas of any kind, we're dealing with some things right now that we shouldn't have to. None of these things should happen to women, but they do. They happen to men as well. They happen to children. Oftentimes, this starts in childhood for many of us, and so it's a difficult time. And factored into this is authority. Okay, and now the rumor or what we're hearing in the news reports are that if the judge and the woman that has made these allegations um, are to in fact meet with the Judiciary Committee, they want them to sit at the same table. I have to tell you, I'm a survivor, and I am so triggered just by that thought. The thought of having to sit at a table with any of the men who have put their hands on me. You don't have to do that in a court. It's bad enough you got to be in the same room with them. But if you have to sit at the same table with them at the same time, because that's what it seems to be suggesting, and I hope that that's not the case, but I'll bet it is. Because the men on that committee, many of them were there during the Anita Hill trial, because after all, she was on trial, wasn't she? But the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings, she testified as to what her experience was with him. And of course, these foolish men put him on the court anyway. He does not belong on the court, nor does any man who's put his hands on women or have made them uncomfortable in any way. We have to have a higher standard for the people that sit on that court. And to put this woman in this position now simply because she came forward with information to tell, to report, to say the words, someone raped me, or someone tried to rape me, or someone put their hands on me, is one of the hardest things you can say. I was molested as a child by my father. He made life very, very difficult for me growing up. Finally, my parents divorced. I was the one who found the apartment and said, Mom, we're moving. I had just graduated from high school. I did it a year early as a junior because I wanted to get away. He passed a few years ago. And when I got the call, the first thing that I thought was that I'm safe. And I looked at my husband and I said, I'm safe now. And it was the first time. And that was in 2013. I turned 61 next month. But once this happens to you, and then of course, if it happens in other ways, throughout your life, which it has to me, I'm blessed with a husband who doesn't hurt me like this. He doesn't He doesn't put his hands on me, all right, like some men do to their wives. He never has. It's fascinating because we're both black belts. You know, we used to teach karate, and he got his black belt first and trained me to black belt. So this is not a man who would ever do that to a woman. But he knows plenty who do, and I know plenty who do. We had a motorcycle shop. There was a man in his 60s who wasn't getting what he wanted from the dealership. His bike was over there though, and there was nothing I could do for him. And I tried to be supportive, but ultimately I just said, look, this is going to take the time it takes. It's over there. I can't help you with this until you start bringing your bike to us. We can't, you know, do anything for you. And I'm sorry, you know, but he was wanting something that I couldn't give him, and he was going to leave, and he shook my hand. And he knew that I had severe rheumatoid arthritis and that I was really ill at that time. This was back in 2007, and he shook my hand to leave, and he squeezed it so hard. Now, in our martial arts system, uh, we had, I don't know, 4 or 5 different techniques for handshakes, but there was a desk between us, and I mean, a big, big space between us. I was here, he was over here, and I shook his hand, and I shouldn't have, because I shouldn't shake anyone's hand because my hands were so swollen that my doctor didn't want me shaking anyone's hands. But it's weird when, you know, it's weird to not. So I did, and I would always tell people, now I'm ill. I'm so I've RA. I mean, you could tell my hands were a mess. You know, I was a mess. I looked a mess. I looked ill, and he shook my hand, and it hurt, and I felt something go on my finger. So this finger, you can see this one right here, should look, I'm not flipping people off, but it should look like this. But you see it's much bigger. And this is what he did to me. He damaged my finger. For the first 3 years, it was like maybe 2.5 times the size. I couldn't move it. Eventually, the swelling subsided after 3 years. Where it is, they tried to drain it, but they couldn't. And you can't use a big enough needle there because of nerves and little blood vessels and stuff. Well, anyway, I couldn't do anything about it. And so eventually the swelling subsided and there were nodules left. And that's what I'm dealing with now. This was 11 years ago. And my finger is where it is. And I can't, this is as far as I can bend it. I can't bend it any further. It's my right hand. But this man assaulted me because he was angry, because the dealership wasn't giving him what he wanted, and I couldn't make that happen. But it wasn't my business, see? There's nothing I could do. But it was fine to take that out on me. A few years later, someone who was supposed to be a good customer of ours, someone whose house we'd actually even been to, you know, we were unloading the bike. My husband was unloading the bike out of the back of his truck. He had a flat tire. I'm standing here with a clipboard, going to check the bike in. All of a sudden, I'm hit on the back, and I'm sent forward about 4 or 5 feet. I stopped myself from falling. This man hit me. My husband didn't see. He was up on the far enough away, couldn't hear. He was focused trying to get that bike out of without dropping it, you know, not paying any attention to what was going on because he needed to be focused on what he was doing. So he just didn't know. I turned around, and the look on this guy's face, and I said, "Oh my God." And I realized right at that moment that he had hit me, that it wasn't a mistake, that he hit me. And I said, "Oh my God, what did you do? Don't you ever do that again. You hurt me." I turned around to see if my husband had heard, and he hadn't. There was noise. There was noise around. It was an industrial area. There was noise. He did not hear me. I turned around to look at him. The guy hit me again. Once is a mistake, twice is assault. The sexual harassment I put up with at our shop, the times before this, men have put their hands on me growing up. If these senators force this woman to sit at a table with that man, I hope every single one of them is drug out of there in chains, because that's what they deserve. To survivors out there, I believe you. If no one's ever told you that, I believe you. I know what you go through. It isn't easy. And what we're seeing now, just the thought of this makes me want to get in my car, go to the airport, get on a plane, and go and try to sit in that room and just be there for her. Stand with her. We can't continue to live in a world where women and children and men that have been assaulted, that have been molested, that have been raped, that have been harassed, that somehow the standard for us to be believed is greater than for the guy from the prep school, or the guy who's the CEO or the agent, or whoever's in authority over us, the parent, the relative, the teacher. This man is a judge. He wants to be on the Supreme Court. Well, who wouldn't? But, to there's an arrogance with abusers. They believe that they can be anything, do anything, that nothing should touch them, that there should be no barriers to anything in their lives, that they're entitled to anything that they want. No consequences, no nothing. I know, I lived with one. I grew up with one. World revolves around them. So, if you're being triggered by this, if you're a survivor, or if just this whole thing just disgusts you and you're not a survivor, take some time for yourself. Turn off the TV if you have to. Don't look at anything. Walk away from it. This is a bad, bad situation that we find ourselves again in this country. This is a bad situation. Our children are watching. Our children are watching a president who is as racist as they come, who allegedly puts his hands on women. You have, I don't even know how many women who've come out. You got one writing a book about him. I mean, come on. How much of this do we have to sacrifice? How much of our dignity? How much of our self-respect? How much of what do we owe one another? Now we got to sit and watch this again. We got to sit and watch this woman. She can't even be in her home now. She's getting death threats, all because she told the truth. One of the things that happened to me as a result of all of this is I tell the truth. Yes, I'm an empath, so that's probably a lot of it. I don't deal well with people who lie. But when you grow up the way that I did and the way many of us have grown up, we deal in such deception, such entitlement from our abusers. People who put their hands on us when they shouldn't. Criminals, all of them. Predators, all of them. And yet they're everywhere. And I mean everywhere. We think that this is a rarity. Oh, no. No. It is so intrinsic amongst humanity now. It's insidious. And here we are again. It's bad enough that our children have to see the man in the White House, to see all the things he says, to hear all the things he says. My God, the Boy Scout Jamboree, if that wasn't enough, I don't know what is. And now we got to do it again with a Supreme Court guy? Please. Let's not do to her what we did to what they did, not we, they did to Anita Hill, to Professor Hill. Her parents were there for her. They had to listen to all of this. But they did it. Her family was there to support her. Well, Dr. Ford has a really, really, really big family out there supporting her right now. People she doesn't even know. We're her brothers and sisters in this fight. And we stand with her. Blessed be.